In 1980, there was a woman named Candy Lightner. It's kind of weird. Candy Lightner. You guys might not know who she is, but I remember this was kind of a big thing back when I was in high school. But she was this woman that kind of championed this new organization at the time. And what was happening in the late 70s and the early 80s, it's a long time ago, was there a lot of people who were driving drunk. And there was a lot of deaths, and there was a lot of stuff that was going on in the newspapers about it. And this woman lost a teenage daughter who had just learned to drive in a car accident because a drunk driver went across the median and slammed headfirst into her car, and she was instantly proclaimed dead. And as a result, she was there when the court case was heard and all these things, and then she started researching it, and she found out how many people died as a result of this. And so it became her mission in life to educate people. And as she did that for a while, she began to kind of meet all these people who had the same kind of horrific, terrible, terrifying kinds of stories. And as she kind of gathered them together, she never intended this, but she became the spearhead, and she became the founder of this organization called MAD, Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and then changed over the years into different organizations. But her motivation came because of this life-changing, actually tragic event that happened to her. What's interesting is that I think a lot of great things in people's lives happen as a result of trials, sufferings, difficulties, temptations, hurts that happen in our life. You can either let the frustrations, the difficulties weigh you down and you become despondent or numb or senseless in this world, or you can take those experiences and instead choose to make a difference, to make the most of what God has given you. And sometimes it takes something difficult for us to kind of refocus and become challenged to do something more with our life than what we're doing. So maybe some of you guys are going through some challenges, or maybe some difficulties, or some frustrations, wherever you are in your life, or maybe not. But if you are, don't always think of those things as something that just can discourage you or tear you down, but look at them as an opportunity to do something greater with your life. Paul, in writing to the church in Ephesus, was saying, hey, I'm in prison, you guys are being persecuted, there's all these things that are happening that are negative, but instead of just kind of like saying, woe is me, and feeling despondent or sorry for yourself, let's look at the opportunities that are presented to us, and let's look how we can use our life day by day, right now. Let's gather ourselves together up, and let's make a plan, and let's figure out, let's intentionally decide and contend what can we do in light of what's going on around us and in our lives. I think that's a phenomenal thing that we need to understand. And if you think about it, whether or not you have anything tragic that's happened to you in your life, all of us, if we know who God is, if we know who Jesus Christ is, have been given actually a second chance. Literally, you were dead in your sins, and then knowing Jesus Christ, you're given a new life. And probably when you first got saved, you had all these intentions of like, oh God, I love you so much. Thank you so much for what you've done. And in that moment of emotion and passion, you said, I'm going to give my whole life to you. I'm going to follow you wherever you want me to go. And I'll do whatever you want me to do. But then over the years, maybe that kind of got watered down, or you lost your focus, etc. But what I find is that unless we refocus, it doesn't matter what passion you have. It doesn't matter what experience you've gone through. This woman, Candy Lightner, she says in her own words that there was times when she thought about giving up on this organization because there wasn't enough support, because it seemed like all the people were against her. Even her own family sometimes said, you've taken on something too big. Why are you out there killing yourself when people don't really care, when there's still the same thing going on again and again? And she said there was many times when she felt like giving up, but then she remembered the things that she went through when her daughter died, and the life that was cut short. And then she thought about all the people who are being affected even now, and that gave her renewed energy, focus, and determination to continue on the course that she had set. Whenever life gets you down, I think that is the best time to take a little bit of break and examine and refocus. or whenever life gives you a little bit of a lull and you feel burnt out or tired, maybe not even anything difficult is happening, but you're just going through a time when there seems like everything is just standing still. That's another good time to take a little bit of maybe a day or a few days and just take a time to refocus. I think too many times when we get kind of, knocked down, or we get sick, or we get tired, or we get a little low in our schedule, we look at that as a time for us to either become discouraged or to kind of just, while away our time, do binge watching on something, or, read stuff that we've been meaning to read that doesn't really affect us, rather than just take a little bit of that time and think about, God, what am I doing with my life? And what can I be doing with my life? This morning, my message is really simple. I just want to give you 3 things from this passage that I want us to think about right now. Maybe as we're going back into school or starting it for the first time, or maybe our kids are going back into school, or it's the season in the fall when new things are happening, when we make new commitments to different organizations or different things for our kids or schools or whatnot. There's decisions to be made. And here's what Paul challenges the church of Ephesus that was kind of giving up and saying, well, everything's against us. We're being persecuted. Let's just kind of lie low and we just kind of give up. We're just going to just go and endure each day. He says, no. Christians never endure days, weeks, months. I know there's times in my life when I just wish, I wish next week would come. I wish next month would come. I wish my kids would hurry up and grow up. I wish the next phase of my life would come. Rather than thinking intentionally, the time that God has given to me is so precious. What can I do with it? The first thing that Paul says is something that I think we need to look at, and this is the first step in making the most of the time and making the most of the life that God has given us. In verse 15, Paul says to the church in Ephesus, says, look carefully how you walk, not as unwise, but as wise. Now, if you just take a look at the imagery here, it's very simple. How many of you guys think about walking? You just walk. You don't think about, okay, am I taking steps? You don't think about how you walk. You don't think about things that you take for granted day by day. And so Paul uses that same analogy, and he says, it's something that you do all the time. It's something that you do every day. It's something that you've done since you're a little child all up there now. And he's using that, and he's saying, look carefully about how you walk. The things that you're not even you're not even thinking about, that you're just in a routine about. Maybe it's time for you to take your routine, your daily schedule, and just examine it. It doesn't mean that you have to revamp the whole thing, but just say, why am I doing this? Is this still effective in my life? Is this something I should still be doing? Is this something I need to take out of my life? Is there something else I can be using my time for? And without thinking, without reassessing, is what Paul is saying, you'll be doing the same thing over and over and over and over again without any thought. He's saying, don't live mindlessly. Think about it. Take care. What's the opposite of looking carefully? It's like not looking at all, or being careless, or not worrying about something else that's in your life. Paul wants us to understand that if God exists, and that if He has given us a new life through Christ, then we need to stop drifting and look at our life and see where are we directed, even in our little steps that we take day in and day out. Every once in a while we have to kind of look back and say, what are the goals? What are the long-term goals that I'm headed towards? Because if you lose sight of that, what I find is, especially in my life, is that I get frustrated, and then I get discouraged, and then sometimes I get angry, and I take it out on people around me. Let me give you an example. After a summer break where I honestly kind of took off my, my teaching hat, and I just said, let's just enjoy the summer. And honestly, when you do that with your kids, what happens is that they kind of go backwards, especially Ellie. So all the stuff that she learned, towards the tail end of last school year, she kind of forgot. And so we're doing remedial work right now, and it's a pain because she's frustrated and I'm frustrated. And honestly, getting them to kind of say, you know this already, and all this pressure that I'm adding to her, what ends up happening is that she starts shutting down. And when I look at the specific goal I have for her to master some basics in reading and writing and English and science and history and all these kinds of things, when I get so myopic and focused on that, I get frustrated, she gets frustrated, I get upset, she gets upset, we all shut down, and it's not a happy scene. But then I have to remind myself, and it happened this past week, but I reminded myself, I said, okay, what is the goal of my homeschooling? Because I was like saying, maybe I should just shove her back in school, But why am I not doing it? Because I want to spend time with her, helping her to know who God is in her whole education. I want her to know how to become a woman of character. I want her to know who God's love is, and I want to be there to be able to do that. I want to equip her to be able to not just answer questions well, but to know how to think like God would want her to think. I don't care about the grades. I don't care about what college she gets into or what career she has per se. I just want her to be the woman that God has created her to be. And I want to do as much as I can in her formative years to help her to become that. Doesn't mean I'm perfect. Doesn't mean I'm not frustrated. Actually, I'm frustrated on a day-by-day basis. I get frustrated with Catherine too, even though she does a lot better job. And it's not because they're doing things wrong, but it's because in my mind, I have these short-term goals, and when they don't achieve them, I feel like I'm not doing them justice, and I also feel like they're not doing up to their potential, but I've also lost sight of that long-term goal. Is it really that important to get every answer correct on that homework or that sheet? Catherine took a math test this past week, and I asked her, so what was your grade? Because I write down what grade she gets on her test. And she goes, I got 87 out of 100. And, for me, I'm not like typical Asian, I'm like, whatever, that's a B+, But for me, the way we work it out is if you get 80 under 90, then you have to go take the test again after studying a few more days. And then we average the two scores together to get her grade. So, this is the freedom of being, a parent in some ways and doing her transcript. But at the time I said 87, that's the first thing that came out of my mouth. 87? Said, you've never gotten 87 in the last, few tests. And so what's going on? Why are you slacking? That's what came out of my mouth. And I said, okay, well, why am I frustrated? Because of that short-term grade letter. Rather than, my response is, are you really understanding the material? Right? Do you know how to study it? How are your study habits going? Are you working as hard as you ought to? That's all. I want to know if you're doing your best and you're getting a 70 or an 80, I should be totally satisfied. Shouldn't I? Shouldn't we? And so Paul's saying, look carefully at how you're walking, because sometimes we take for granted those little things that we're already doing, and we don't examine it. Why? Because we don't have this long-term perspective. Or we do, but we've forgotten it. And then he says, look carefully how you walk, day by day, these little things that we do almost automatically. And then he says, make sure you're doing it in a wise way. What's your long-term goal? Examine yourself. A lot of people, they say, this is where I want to get to. And then I look at how they're studying, or I look at what choices they're making in their life. And I'm like, really? Your long-term goal is to become this or to achieve that. And all you're doing is playing games, or all you're doing is going out with your friends. And come on, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. Or the courses that you're taking, or the amount that you're challenging yourself. You think at the level that you're doing what you're doing, you're going to get there? I'm not saying your lifestyle is wrong, but what I'm saying is, does it match up with your long-term goals? Are you going to get there? It doesn't make any sense. If Ellie had her way, she would do like 2 or 3 math problems for her math section every day. At the rate of 2 or 3 math problems, she will never master any kind of arithmetic. You just can't. I don't care how brilliant. Maybe if you're super brilliant, maybe, yeah, you just zip through it. But she's not, I'm not, most of us. The second thing that Paul says right on the heels of that is not only think about carefully how you're walking, how you're doing these automatic things, and are you doing it with wisdom or not. Then he says this. He says, make the best use of the time because the days are evil. I really like this verse because it's something that you have to understand. When it says, make the best use of the time that God has given you because the days are evil, Paul is talking about that if you do not intentionally use your time wisely, that Satan, that there is a force, there's an inertia pushing up against you. And honestly, I think this is true. There's a saying that it says, there's a saying, and maybe you guys haven't heard it this way, recently, but I remember when I was growing up, it always said that, but what is it? Idle hands. What happens with idle hands? They find sin to do. Idle minds, they find sinful thoughts to think. When we're idle, when we have too much free time on our hands, it turns towards evil. Why? Because there is a flow in this world, a river, a stream, a torrent, if you will, that's pushing against us. And if we're not focused, and if we're not paddling, if we're not making some effort to go in a specific direction towards God, the world will sweep us along in its unrighteousness, in its sinful ways, without us ever knowing it. We'll just kind of go with the flow. Going with the flow is what Paul is saying here. The days are evil. If you just go with whatever your hand finds to do, think whatever, watch whatever, do whatever everybody else is doing, it is going to cause you to go to places where you ought not to go as a child of God, to do things, to say things, to see things that you ought not. You have to have an intentionality about you. Go like, well, I don't care. No. The time that you have is the most precious commodity. And you'll notice this as you get older and older. And there's only one way to make the best use of the time that we have. And that is to know what we're going to do. To know where we're headed. Without that, you can't make a good use of your time. If you don't know where you're headed. Now, people say, well, Pastor James, I don't know where I'm headed. I don't know. The thing is that most of us don't have short or long-term goals. And even as Christians, we need to have that to a certain extent. Like I told you, my goals for my girls are such. And Captain, I have about 2 more years. And Ellie, I have another about 8 years. While I'm homeschooling them and going through all of that, I have this time, right? When I think about that long-term goals, I have a great intent, I have a great heart. I can talk about it ad infinitum, and when people ask me why I homeschool, I have all these reasonings. But if I don't have it broken down into concrete, doable steps, you know what? Nothing's going to happen. It's just going to be good intentions, and it's all going to go by the wayside. I've been intending to do this for 6 months, and I finally did it. Because at the end of last school year, I said, I gotta do this. And then I didn't end up doing it for the last 3 months of school. And in the summer, we kind of blew it off. And then in the fall, I said it. I told my girls I was gonna do it, and then it took me like another month to get it done. But I finally bought this thing that it sticks to your wall. It's tacky, and it's about this big, and it's a weekly calendar. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Saturday. And that's all it has. And on the bottom, it's like this whiteboard kind of thing that you could erase, and it's blank each day. And the reason why I bought that is because if I don't break it down week by week, what we're going to do, what we're trying to accomplish that week, it doesn't get done. And I'm the only one thinking about it. And so it becomes like pulling teeth. Well, why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? And so, honestly, we've only done it for like a week, but it actually I could see fruit from it. So we did that. And then I broke that down into 2 columns. I wish I'd done this earlier, but I don't know how well it's going to hold out and how consistent I'm going to be, but I'm really pushing it. And so the top part is Monday through Friday, and then Saturday and Sunday is a little bit different, but Monday through Friday, what are you going to be studying? What activities are we going to do related to school? So it's all about school. And the bottom half is BLD. You know what that is? Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. What are we eating? Because that's another big thing for me. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to cook then? And Ellie is very picky. And so I sat down and we wrote down what we're going to eat each day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Breakfast, lunch. And oh my gosh, even that just took away so much stress. You know what? Because they helped decide what we're going to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. They had to decide. So then when it came out, they're like, oh, I don't want to eat this. Can't do it. It's already set. And it's been funny because Ellie's been just eating whatever has been on that list. And actually, I had to change up one thing because we didn't have the ingredients. And she's like, hey, it was on the list. How come we're not eating that? And I'm like, sorry, we won't let that be a regular occurrence. Unless you schedule, unless you plan, you cannot redeem your time. I'm telling you that right now. I'm not a big scheduler. I like to just do things spontaneously, but I know this truth. And I'll tell you one more truth about this before we kind of move on to the last one is this. I know the reality is that too many times we let things squeeze out important things from our schedule. We let urgent things. And so I have this kind of paradigm that I always use, and maybe I've said it before, but hopefully it'll stick. You know, if you guys think about it, there's two kinds of things in our life. One are the important things. And if you really sit down, you can sit down and write down what are the important things. What is really important to do. And then there's also the urgent things. Things maybe that are important or aren't important that are urgent. You know, like paying your bills on time so you don't get a fine, you know, or so you don't get, you know, upcharges. Those are kind of urgent, okay? And some of them are important because you can lose your house, your car, or whatever. And then there's really important things which are like spending time with my kids, you know, really developing a relationship with my wife, my husband, spending time with God. Those are all important, but guess what? The problem is that those things don't scream and cry out and have a deadline. They're not always urgent. And so when you tie these two things together, you have to constantly think as you put things in your schedule, what is important and what is urgent, that's got to have first priority. And then what is important and not as urgent, you have to figure that out where that's going to go, but you have to place it in your schedule. And then what is urgent and not that important, you might put that on your schedule, maybe lower. Whenever it's due, after you get the other things done, you get that done. And then what's not urgent and not important, maybe you don't have to do it. Just write it on your list. But I have things on my to-do list that are not important and not urgent that keeps getting pushed. You know what some of those things are? Some of those things are, oh, I wanted to read this book for fun. That's not important and not urgent, so it keeps getting pushed. To be honest, like watching a football game or watching a movie or any of those things, to me, fall into the category of not urgent, not important. But you know what I find with a lot of people, especially college and you know, older folks too? That not important, not urgent thing fills up a lot of our time. And we still haven't done the important or the urgent things. It always amazes me because I know I was exactly like this in college. When you're in college and your finals week, you're so tired and you would kill for a good night's sleep because you know you're just studying and you want to get good grades. And then as soon as finals are over, you've done all, because you know that cram, like you know, for 2 weeks, you're doing what's important and what's urgent because you know finals and getting good grades is urgent and it's important. It's everything in your life. Eating is not as important. Sleeping is not. Nothing's important. Friends are not as important. And then all of a sudden, as soon as you're done with that, you're like, what are all the non-urgent, non-important things I can do? Like binge watching or going out and eating, and then actually it's important to sleep so you don't get sick, but nobody sleeps. Everyone wants to stay up. I'm done, let me go do something now. You would have killed for a day of sleep, but now you don't want to sleep. You're wide awake. Why does that happen? Because we don't think through these things. We need to make the most of our time. And if we don't, before you know it, you'll run out. The last thing that Paul says that I want to encourage you is very interesting to me, is because he says this: therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the will of God of the Lord is. You know, if we don't know God's will and we don't know our purposes and what's really important, we're going to live our lives very foolishly. Very foolish. And foolishness to me, the simple definition of foolishness is this: you can make a mistake, but to not correct that mistake and continue to make that mistake over and over again while knowing it's a mistake is my definition of biblical foolishness. You know what God's will for you is? His will for you is not to never make mistakes or to live a perfectly holy life at all times in all ways. His goal for you is to mature and to grow and to be more and more than you were. See, all the rules and laws in the Bible that God gives, it's not for the sake of, if you'll just follow my methodology, if you'll just follow my rules to the T, then your life will be right. No. All of those are a guideline that eventually he wants us to be freed of. That's why grace is so amazing, because it's not about following the rules, it's about following after God. It's about having the heart and the mind of God. Here where it says, know what the will of the Lord is, it didn't say know what the commands of the Lord is. Memorize the commands of the Lord and do them. It says know the will. Basically it's saying, Know what God's desire, passion, or heart is, and may that be yours too. Then you'll be able to overcome all those foolish mistakes that you repeat. I just want to encourage you guys. This is not so much, here's the practical, pragmatic way, but would you take a little bit of time, maybe wherever you are in your season of life, and say, God, what's my purpose? How can I make the most of my life? And just even write down a few things. So here's my goal for the end of this year, to the end of this year. Here's my goal for this school year. Here's my goal for, my kids or my marriage or my career or whatnot, for my spiritual life. Let me give you a little perspective as I end the message this morning. Most of you probably haven't heard of this lady. She passed away about 20 years ago, but she was actually pretty well known back in my day when I was in college and a young adult. And she wrote a column in a newspaper. She was on TV. She was kind of like this humorous commentary on life. But she was a comedian, and yet she had some really great insights. Sometimes comedy opens us up to really laugh at ourselves and look. Her name was Erma Bombeck. I don't know if you guys know who she is, Erma Bombeck. But she died from a long fight with cancer. She needed an organ transplant, and though she had enough money and enough fame to actually be moved up the list to get an organ transplant ahead of other people, she chose not to, because she said that's not right. So she had some pretty deep convictions, and she was a Christian as well too. And I remember hearing her speak one time, and she just blew me away. But towards her tail end of her life, when she was waiting for that organ, and she kind of knew that maybe it was the end of her life, even if she got an organ transplant, what her doctors were saying, it may prolong your life a little bit, but it won't save your life. And in some of her writings at the end, she didn't write a book, but she wrote some things. Here's what she said about how she would live her life if she had a chance to do it again. And some things maybe that we can take to heart of how to make the most of our time, how to really refocus on what's important. Here's what she said. I would have talked less and listened more. I would have invited friends over to dinner, even when the carpet was dirty, the sofa was faded, the house not clean. I would have eaten popcorn in the good living room and worried much less about dirt when someone wanted to light a fire in the fireplace. I would have taken time to listen to my grandfather ramble on and on about his youth. I would never have insisted that the car windows be rolled up on a summer day because I had just had my hair done. I would have burned the pink candle sculpted like a rose before it melted in storage. I would have sat on the lawn with my children and not worried about grass stains. I would have cried and laughed less while watching television and more while watching life. I would have gone to bed when I was sick instead of pretending the earth would go into a holding pattern if I wasn't there for one day. I would never have bought anything just because it was practical, wouldn't become dirty, or was guaranteed to last forever. Instead of wishing away 9 months of pregnancy, I would have cherished every moment and realized the wonderment growing inside me was the only chance in my life to assist God in a miracle. When my kids kissed me and they were all dirty, I would never have said later, now go get washed up. There would have been more I love yous, more I'm sorries, but mostly given another shot at life, I would seize every minute, look at it, and really see it, live it, and never give it back. It's easy for us to have these intentions, but what I know is that God gives us an opportunity every day as the sun rises to take that day, to seize the day, to live it purposefully, to not wish that it was the next day or the next week or the next month, but say, Lord, this is the day that you have made. I will rejoice and be glad. How may I bless others? How may I live this life? How can I be purposeful today? No matter what comes. Whether I'm sick or healthy, whether I'm stressed or not, whether there's difficulties or joys, I'm going to live this day fully for you. Let's have that heart and attitude. Let's think that together this morning. Let's pray together.